My name is Lula Richardson, and I am 58 years old. 7 years ago, I made what I thought was the most loving decision of my life. I gave my son the house his father, and I built together, hoping to secure his future after his difficult divorce. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that one day this same son would demand I pay rent just to visit the grandchildren in the home I had freely given him. What happened next shocked everyone, including my son, and taught me the most valuable lesson about setting boundaries that I have ever learned. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you are watching from, and please hit that like button and subscribe for more real life stories that might surprise you. Just like this one surprised me. Trust me, you will want to hear how this unfolds. To understand how devastating my son's demand truly was, you need to know the story behind that house. I married my husband Harold in 1993 when I was 27 years old. We were both starting our careers in Portland, Oregon, him as an electrician and me as a school administrator. For the first 5 years of our marriage, we lived in a cramped one-bedroom apartment, saving every penny we could. In 1998, we finally had enough for a down payment on our dream home. It was a modest four-bedroom, two-bathroom house in the Laurelhurst neighborhood with a big backyard, perfect for the family we hoped to have. Harold spent countless weekends renovating that kitchen, installing new cabinets with his own hands. I painted every single room, carefully choosing colors that would make our home feel warm and welcoming. Our son Marcus was born in 1991, and that house became the center of our universe. Harold built Marcus a treehouse in the giant oak tree out back. I created a garden where we grew tomatoes and herbs together. Every Christmas morning happened in that living room. Every birthday party took place in that backyard. 20 years of memories were embedded in those walls. Harold was diagnosed with lung cancer in 2017. He had never smoked a day in his life, but sometimes cancer just happens. We fought it together for 8 long months. During those final weeks as he lay in our bedroom looking out at the garden we had planted together, he made me promise something. "Lula," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "when I am gone, give the house to Marcus. He is going to need help after his divorce, and those grandkids need stability. Promise me you will take care of our boy." I held his hand and promised, even though the thought of leaving our home terrified me. Harold passed away in January 2018, and I was left alone in a house that suddenly felt enormous and empty. Marcus had just gone through a brutal divorce the year before. His ex-wife had taken half of everything, including custody arrangements that limited his time with his 2 children. At 31 years old, he was starting over, living in a tiny apartment and struggling to make ends meet as a construction foreman. When I told him about my decision to transfer the house to him, tears streamed down his face. "Mom, are you sure about this?" he asked, sitting at our kitchen table where he had eaten breakfast for 18 years. "This is your home. Dad built this for you." "Your father wanted you to have it," I told him. "And so do I. You need stability for Emma and Jake when they visit. I want my grandchildren to have the same happy memories in this house that you did." The legal process took 3 months. I hired a lawyer to make sure everything was done properly. We transferred the deed completely into Marcus's name. I kept nothing for myself except a few pieces of furniture and my personal belongings. The house, worth approximately $400,000 at the time, became his free and clear. On the day I signed the final papers, I sat in my lawyer's office holding a pen that felt like it weighed 100 pounds. As I wrote my signature, I was not just giving away a house. I was giving away the place where I had been Harold's wife, where I had raised my son, where I had been happiest. But seeing the relief and gratitude on Marcus's face made it worth every tear. "I promise I will take care of this place, Mom," he said, hugging me tight. "And I promise I will take care of you when you get older. This family looks out for each other." I moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment across town. It was clean and comfortable, but it was not home. Home was where Marcus and my grandchildren now lived, and I told myself that was exactly how it should be. For the first 3 years after I gave Marcus the house, everything felt perfect. Better than perfect, actually. Marcus seemed to transform from a struggling divorced dad into a confident man who finally had his feet under him. Having his own home gave him the stability he needed to rebuild his relationship with Emma and Jake. I visited every Sunday for dinner. Marcus would cook Harold's famous barbecue ribs on the back patio, and I would make my grandmother's cornbread in the kitchen I had once considered mine. Emma, who was 5 when I moved out, would run to me the moment I arrived, wrapping her 8-year-old arms around my waist. Jake, now 10, would show me his latest Lego creations in the playroom that used to be Harold's office. Those Sunday dinners became the highlight of my week. We would eat at the dining room table Harold had built, sharing stories about our week and making plans for the upcoming holidays. Marcus would always walk me to my car afterward, thanking me again for giving him the house and telling me how much it meant to his children to have their grandmother so involved in their lives. During those 3 years, I helped Marcus with numerous home improvement projects. We painted the exterior trim together one summer, spending long afternoons on ladders, talking about everything and nothing. I paid for a new roof when the old one started leaking. When the furnace died during a particularly cold winter, I quietly covered the replacement cost without Marcus even asking. I also spent countless hours working in the garden, teaching Emma how to plant seeds and showing Jake how to identify different types of birds that visited our feeders. The backyard became our special place where we would have picnics and play hide and seek among the rose bushes Harold had planted for our 10th anniversary. Everything changed in late 2020 when Marcus met Sarah. She was 28 years old, worked in marketing for a tech startup, and seemed ambitious and focused. When Marcus first introduced her to me, she was polite but distant. She smiled at all the right moments during conversation, but I could see her eyes wandering around the house, taking inventory of everything. "Your son has a beautiful home," she told me that first evening, emphasizing the word "your" in a way that made me slightly uncomfortable. "He must have worked very hard to afford something like this." "Actually, I gave him this house after his father passed away," I explained, thinking she would appreciate knowing about our family's generous spirit. Sarah's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "How nice," she said, but her tone suggested she found it anything but nice. Despite that odd first impression, I was genuinely happy for Marcus. He deserved love and companionship after everything he had been through. Sarah seemed to make him happy, and she was kind to Emma and Jake, which was what mattered most to me. They got married in a small ceremony in the backyard in September 2021. I paid for the flowers and catering, wanting to contribute to their special day. Sarah wore a simple white dress and carried a bouquet of roses from the garden Harold had planted. As I watched my son say his vows under the oak tree where his childhood treehouse still hung, I felt Harold's presence and knew he would have been proud. After the wedding, Sarah moved into the house permanently. At first, she seemed to be trying to establish herself as the new woman of the house, which I understood completely. She rearranged furniture and redecorated the master bedroom. She planted new flowers in the front yard and organized the kitchen pantry. These were all normal things for a new wife to do, and I tried to give her space to make the house feel like her own. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. My Sunday dinner invitations became less frequent. When I did come over, Sarah would be polite but cool, spending most of the evening on her phone or finding excuses to busy herself in other parts of the house. The warm, relaxed atmosphere that had characterized our family gatherings began to feel strained and artificial. The first real crack in our relationship appeared in early 2022. I had called Marcus to ask if I could come over on a Saturday to help Emma with a school project about family history. Emma had specifically requested that I bring photo albums and tell her stories about her grandfather. "Actually, Mom, Saturday is not good," Marcus said, his voice sounding oddly formal. "Sarah has some friends coming over, and she would prefer if we kept it family only this weekend." I was confused. "But I am family, Marcus. Emma asked me specifically to help her with this project." I know, he said quickly. "Maybe we can do it another time. Sarah just wants to entertain without any complications." Complications. That word stung more than I wanted to admit. When had I become a complication in my own son's life? A month later, Sarah announced she was pregnant. I was overjoyed at the prospect of another grandchild and immediately offered to help prepare a nursery in the spare bedroom. That was when Sarah's territorial instincts really kicked into high gear. "Thanks for the offer," she said when I brought it up during one of our increasingly rare dinners together. "But Marcus and I have our own ideas about how we want to decorate. This is our house now, and we need our privacy to make decisions about our family." Our house now. The words felt like a slap. I looked at Marcus, expecting him to say something to remind his wife that I was also family and that my input had value. Instead, he stared down at his plate and said nothing. From that point forward, my visits to the house became increasingly uncomfortable. I was no longer invited to stay overnight when the weather was bad or when we had been cooking together late into the evening. Instead, Sarah would make pointed comments about how late it was getting and how they needed to start thinking about bedtime routines. The children began to notice the tension. Emma, now 8 years old, started asking me quietly why Mommy Sarah seemed upset whenever I visited. Jake, who had always been perceptive beyond his years, began giving me extra long hugs when I left, as if he sensed these visits might become less frequent. The breaking point came during Emma's 9th birthday party in May. I had arrived early to help set up decorations and prepare food, just as I had done for every birthday since she was born. Sarah met me at the front door with a forced smile and an uncomfortable request. "Lula, I appreciate you wanting to help, but I have already taken care of all the preparations. Maybe you could just enjoy being a guest today instead of working." Being a guest, in the house I had given them, in the kitchen where I had cooked thousands of meals, at my own granddaughter's birthday party. I spent the entire party feeling like an outsider watching Sarah play the role of the perfect hostess while I sat awkwardly on the sidelines. When Emma opened her presents, she squealed with delight over the art supplies I had carefully chosen for her. But when she ran to hug me and thank me, Sarah immediately redirected her attention to other gifts. "Say thank you to Grandma Lula and then come help Mommy serve the cake," she instructed, emphasizing my name in a way that made it clear I was not the only grandmother who mattered anymore. As I drove home that evening, I realized that something fundamental had shifted in my relationship with my son and his new family. I was no longer a welcome presence in the house I had given them. I was being systematically pushed out of my own family, and Marcus was allowing it to happen. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning in March 2023. I was sitting in my small apartment kitchen drinking coffee and reading the newspaper when Marcus called. His voice sounded different, cold, formal, professional even. "Lula," he said, using my first name instead of calling me Mom, "we need to talk about your visits. Sarah feels uncomfortable with the current arrangement." I set down my coffee cup, my hand trembling slightly. "What do you mean uncomfortable? I only visit every other Sunday now, and I always call first." "It is not about frequency," Marcus continued, his tone remaining businesslike. "It is about boundaries. We are trying to establish our own family traditions, and having you here so often makes that difficult." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. "Marcus, honey, I am your mother. Emma and Jake are my grandchildren. This is not about taking over your family. I just want to be part of it." "I understand that, but we need to discuss some new ground rules. Can you come over this afternoon so we can talk in person?" The drive to the house felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. I kept thinking about all the times I had made this same drive with groceries for family dinners, with birthday presents for the children, with plants for the garden. Now I was driving there to be told I was no longer welcome in the home I had freely given away. Marcus and Sarah were waiting for me in the living room where Harold and I had spent countless evenings watching television together, where we had opened Christmas presents every year for 2 decades, where I had rocked Marcus to sleep when he was a colicky baby. Sarah was sitting on the couch with her hands folded over her growing belly, looking like she was chairing a business meeting. Marcus sat beside her, avoiding eye contact with me. I took the armchair across from them, the same chair where I had nursed Marcus through chicken pox and helped him with homework throughout elementary school. "Thank you for coming," Sarah said, speaking as if this were her house and I were a visitor who needed to be managed. "We want to be very clear about our expectations going forward." I looked at Marcus, hoping he would take the lead in this conversation, hoping he would soften whatever blow was coming. Instead, he stared at the coffee table Harold had built with his own hands and said nothing. "If you want to continue visiting on a regular basis," Sarah continued, "we think it would be fair for you to contribute to the household expenses. $500 a month seems reasonable for overnight stays and regular meal privileges." I could not have heard that correctly. "Excuse me, $500 a month," Marcus repeated, finally looking up at me, but speaking like he was quoting a rental agreement. "Sarah is right. You use utilities when you are here, you eat our food, and you take up space in the guest bedroom. It is only fair that you contribute." I sat there in stunned silence, looking around at the living room I had decorated in the house I had paid for, listening to my son demand rent money from me. The irony was so absurd it was almost funny. Almost. "This is a joke, right?" I finally managed to say. "You want me to pay rent to visit my own grandchildren in the house I gave you?" "It is not your house anymore," Sarah said firmly. "We understand that it might be hard for you to adjust to that reality, but legally and financially, this is our home now. If you want to be here regularly, you should contribute like any other regular house guest would." I turned to Marcus, searching his face for some sign of the son I had raised, the man I had sacrificed everything to help. "Marcus, do you hear what you are saying to me right now?" He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "This is just a business decision, nothing personal. We have expenses, and Sarah is right that you do use resources when you are here." Nothing personal. My son was charging me rent to see my grandchildren, and it was nothing personal. "I need some time to think about this," I said, standing up on shaking legs. "This is not at all what I expected from this conversation." "Of course," Sarah said with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Take all the time you need, but please understand that if you want to maintain your current level of involvement with our family, this is what it will cost." I walked to my car feeling like I was in some kind of bizarre nightmare. As I drove away from the house, I caught a glimpse of Emma's face in her bedroom window. She waved at me with a confused expression, probably wondering why Grandma was leaving so soon after arriving. That night, I called my sister Dorothy, who lived in Seattle. When I told her what had happened, she was so angry she could barely speak coherently. "That ungrateful, spoiled brat," she said. "After everything you have done for that boy, after giving him a house worth $500,000, he wants to charge you rent to see your own grandchildren. Lula, please tell me you are not actually considering paying this ridiculous demand." But I was considering it. That was the most humiliating part of all. I was actually thinking about paying my son $500 a month just to maintain my relationship with Emma and Jake. What choice did I have? If I refused, I would lose access to my grandchildren. If I paid, at least, I could still be part of their lives. The next month, I wrote Marcus a check for $500 with rent for visiting privileges written in the memo line. I had never felt more humiliated in my entire life. Paying that first rent check was like swallowing poison. I handed it to Marcus during my next visit, and he took it without meeting my eyes, folding it quickly and putting it in his pocket like he was ashamed of what he was doing, but not ashamed enough to stop doing it. Sarah, however, had no such shame. She immediately began treating me like a paying tenant rather than a family member. The guest bedroom, which had always been available whenever I wanted to stay overnight, was now subject to Sarah's approval and scheduling. "I need 24 hours' notice if you want to use the guest room," she informed me during that first paid visit. "And please remember that quiet hours begin at 9 p.m. Marcus has to get up early for work." I was being given house rules. In the house, I had given them. The kitchen privileges I had always taken for granted were suddenly restricted. "Please don't use the master bathroom upstairs." Sarah told me, when I automatically headed toward the bathroom I had used for 20 years. "That is our private space now. There is a guest bathroom downstairs that would be more appropriate for you." More appropriate for me, in my own house. During meals, I was expected to ask permission before opening the refrigerator or helping myself to anything. "I have been trying to keep track of our grocery expenses," Sarah explained when she saw me reaching for a bottle of water. "Could you let me know when you want something so I can factor it into our household budget?" I was being charged for bottles of water in the house I had given them. The most heartbreaking part was watching how confused Emma and Jake became by these new arrangements. During my second paid visit, Emma asked me directly, "Grandma, why do you have to give Mommy Sarah money to come see us?" I did not know how to answer that question. How do you explain to a 9-year-old that her father is charging her grandmother rent to visit? How do you maintain a child's faith in family loyalty when the adults around her are behaving in ways that make no sense? Sometimes grown-ups have complicated arrangements. I said weakly, hating myself for not being able to give her a better explanation. Jake, who was now 13 and increasingly perceptive, seemed to understand more than he let on. He started spending more time with me during my visits, almost as if he were trying to make up for the awkwardness his parents had created. He would show me his school projects and ask me to help him with homework, just like old times. "I miss when you used to come over whenever you wanted," he told me quietly during one of my scheduled paid visits. It feels weird that you have to make appointments now. Out of the mouths of babes. If a 13-year-old could see how wrong this situation was, why could not his father? The second month. I wrote another check for $500, feeling a little piece of my dignity die in the process. The third month, I did the same. Each time, Marcus took the money with less and less eye contact, and Sarah's demands became more and more outrageous. The utility bills have been higher lately, she mentioned during my fourth paid visit. I think we need to adjust your monthly contribution to $700 to cover the additional costs. $700 to visit my own grandchildren in the house I had given them. That was the moment I realized I was not dealing with reasonable people who were temporarily confused about boundaries. I was dealing with people who were systematically exploiting my love for my family to extract money from me. Sarah had found a way to turn my relationship with my grandchildren into a profit center, and Marcus was allowing it to happen. I was being emotionally blackmailed, and it was working because I was too afraid of losing Emma and Jake to fight back. But as I wrote that fourth check, something shifted inside me. Instead of feeling defeated and humiliated, I started feeling angry. Really, truly angry. These people were taking advantage of me, using my love for my grandchildren as leverage to extort money from me, and they were doing it in the house I had given them out of pure generosity. Harold would have been horrified. He would never have stood for seeing his wife treated this way by their own son. And suddenly, I realized that I did not have to stand for it either. That night, I called my old friend David Thompson, who had been Harold's lawyer and had helped us with estate planning over the years. I had a question about the legal documents we had signed when I transferred the house to Marcus. David, I said, I need to ask you about something. When I signed the house over to Marcus, did I retain any legal rights to the property? Let me pull your file, he said. Give me a call tomorrow and I will have a complete answer for you. When David called me back the next day, he had very interesting news. Lula, I have been reviewing the documents we prepared when you transferred the house. Do you remember that we discussed creating a life estate for you as part of the transfer? I vaguely remembered him mentioning something about legal protections, but I had been so focused on giving Marcus the house that I had not paid much attention to the technical details. What exactly does that mean? I asked. It means that while Marcus owns the house, you retain the right to live there for the rest of your life. Legally speaking, you still have a significant ownership interest in that property. No one can charge you rent to stay in a house where you hold a life estate. For the first time in months, I smiled. Armed with David's legal advice and a renewed sense of my own rights, I began planning my response to Marcus and Sarah's rent demands. David explained that my life estate gave me substantial legal standing and that charging me rent to stay in a house where I held legal ownership rights was not just morally wrong but potentially illegal. If you want to assert your rights, David told me, we can serve them with a formal notice that explains your legal position. Sometimes people back down when they realize they are on shaky legal ground. But I had a better idea. If Marcus wanted to treat our family relationship like a business transaction, then I was going to show him exactly what a business transaction looked like. Over the next week, I carefully researched my options. I discovered that my life estate gave me the right to occupy the house whenever I wanted for as long as I wanted without paying anyone anything. More importantly, I learned that if Marcus was treating the house like rental property by charging me to stay there, then I had the same rights as any other tenant, including the right to proper notice before any changes to our arrangement. But I also had something that regular tenants do not have. As a life estate holder, I had the legal authority to require Marcus to maintain the property properly and to prevent him from using it in ways that interfered with my ownership rights. Charging me rent to exercise my legal rights definitely qualified as interference. David helped me prepare a formal legal document. It was not a lawsuit, but rather an official notice asserting my legal rights and demanding that Marcus and Sarah stop their rent demands immediately. The document was professional, precise, and absolutely devastating in its legal implications. Notice of life estate rights and demand to cease interference. The document was titled. It went on to explain that I held a legal life estate in the property that charging me rent violated my ownership rights and that any future attempts to restrict my access to the house or charge me fees for staying there would be considered legal harassment. The final paragraph was my favorite part. Please be advised that if these demands for payment do not cease immediately, I will be forced to exercise my full legal rights as a life estate holder, including the right to occupy the property on a permanent basis. In other words, if they did not stop charging me rent to visit, I could legally move back into the house permanently, and there was nothing they could do to stop me. I had David send the notice through certified mail on a Friday afternoon. I knew Marcus would receive it on Monday morning, and I spent the weekend imagining his reaction when he realized that his mother was not the helpless victim he thought she was. The phone started ringing Monday evening. "What the hell is this legal document?" Marcus shouted into the phone the moment I answered. "Did you threaten to evict us?" "I did not threaten to evict you," I said calmly. "I simply informed you that I have legal rights in that house that you have been violating by charging me rent. This is a business decision, nothing personal." I was using his exact words against him, and he knew it. "You cannot be serious about this," he said, his voice rising. "We have a baby coming. Sarah is 8 months pregnant. You cannot throw us out of our house over some stupid legal technicality." "It is not your house, Marcus. It is our house. You own it. But I have a life estate in it, which means I have the legal right to live there whenever I choose. I gave you that house out of love, not so you could turn around and charge me rent to see my own grandchildren." Sarah grabbed the phone from Marcus. "You are being completely unreasonable," she screamed. "We have bills to pay and a baby coming. $500 a month is nothing compared to what this house is worth." "You are absolutely right," I said. $500 is nothing compared to what this house is worth. So you should have no trouble paying your bills without extorting rent money from me." "We are not extorting anything from you," Sarah shot back. "We are asking you to be reasonable about the costs of maintaining a household, and I am asking you to be reasonable about respecting your mother-in-law's legal rights," I replied. "David Thompson is my lawyer, and he assures me that my position is very strong. If you would like to discuss this further, you can have your lawyer call him." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "We do not have a lawyer," Marcus said quietly. "Then I suggest you get one," I said, "because if I receive one more demand for rent money, I will exercise my right to move back into that house permanently. And unlike you, I will not be charging anyone rent to live there." I hung up the phone feeling more empowered than I had in months. The silence from Marcus and Sarah lasted exactly 1 week. During that week, I imagined them frantically researching life estates and probably discovering that I was absolutely right about my legal position. I also imagined Sarah realizing that her plan to turn me into a source of rental income had backfired spectacularly. When Marcus finally called, his voice was completely different. Gone was the cold, businesslike tone he had been using for months. He sounded like my son again, scared and ashamed and desperate to fix what he had broken. "Mom," he said, and it was the first time he had called me Mom instead of Lula in months. "Can I come over? I really need to talk to you, alone." He arrived at my apartment that evening, looking like he had not slept in days. His hair was messy, his clothes wrinkled, and his eyes were red-rimmed. When I opened the door, he broke down crying before he could even say hello. "I am so sorry," he sobbed, collapsing onto my couch like the little boy who used to run to me whenever he was hurt or scared. "Mom, I am so sorry. What I did to you was horrible." I sat down next to him and waited for him to compose himself enough to talk. Part of me wanted to comfort him immediately, to tell him everything was okay and that we could move past this. But the other part of me knew that we needed to have a real conversation about what had happened and why it could never happen again. "I never wanted to charge you rent," he said when he finally stopped crying. "That was all Sarah's idea. She kept saying that you were taking advantage of our generosity, that you were treating our house like it was still yours, that we needed to establish boundaries." "Marcus," I said gently, "it was still my house. Legally speaking, I had every right to be there whenever I wanted." "I know that now," he said. "David Thompson called our real estate agent and she explained life estates to us. Mom, I had no idea. When we did the paperwork, I thought you were giving up all your rights to the house. Did you think I was stupid?" I asked. "Did you think I would give away everything I owned without keeping some protections for myself?" "I did not think about it at all," he admitted. "I was just so grateful to have the house that I did not pay attention to the legal details. And then, when Sarah started talking about you contributing financially, it seemed reasonable to me." What seemed reasonable about charging your own mother rent to see her grandchildren? Marcus was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands folded in his lap. Sarah said you were spoiled, he finally said. She said that you had always gotten everything you wanted from our family, and that it was time for you to start giving back instead of just taking. She said that if you really loved us, you would be happy to help with our expenses. I felt a surge of anger toward my daughter-in-law, but I forced myself to stay calm. And what do you think now? I think I was an idiot, he said. I think I let my wife convince me to treat my own mother like a tenant in the house you gave me. I think I was so afraid of losing Sarah that I was willing to hurt you to keep her happy. Why were you afraid of losing her? Marcus looked up at me with an expression I had not seen since he was a teenager, confessing to breaking something valuable. Because she threatened to leave me if I did not start putting our nuclear family first. She said that you were too involved in our lives, that you were interfering with our ability to be independent, and that if I did not set boundaries with you, she would take the baby and move back to California with her parents. There it was, the real reason behind all of this. Sarah had manipulated Marcus's fear of another failed marriage to turn him against his own mother. She had used his children as leverage to force him to choose between his wife and his family of origin. So you chose her over me, I said. I thought I was choosing my marriage over my mother, he said. I thought I was being a good husband, but I realize now that any woman who would ask me to choose between her and my family is not worth keeping. Are you leaving her? I do not know, he said honestly. We have a baby coming in 2 months. She is scared and pregnant and probably just as confused as I am about how we got to this point. But I do know that I will never let anyone come between you and me again. Ever. I reached over and took his hand, the same hand I had held when he was scared of monsters under his bed, when he had fallen off his bicycle, when he had cried over his first broken heart. I forgive you, I said, but things cannot go back to the way they were. We need new rules, and Sarah needs to understand that I am not going anywhere. What kind of rules? First, no one ever charges me anything to visit my family again. Period. Second, Sarah apologizes to me sincerely and commits to treating me with respect going forward. Third, if she has problems with me, she talks to me directly instead of manipulating you to be her messenger. And if she refuses, I smiled at my son, feeling more like his mother than I had in months. Then I exercise my legal right to move back into my house, and she can decide whether she wants to share space with me or find somewhere else to live. Marcus actually laughed. I think she will choose to apologize. Sarah's apology came 3 days later, and it was surprisingly genuine. She arrived at my apartment alone, looking tired and enormously pregnant and completely defeated. I owe you an apology, she said when I opened the door. What I did was wrong, and I know that now. I invited her in and made us both tea, curious to hear what she had to say when Marcus was not there to influence the conversation. I was scared, she said, settling awkwardly into my armchair. When I married Marcus, I thought I was getting a fresh start with a man who had his life together. But then I realized that he came with all this history and this house that you had given him, and these children who loved their grandmother more than they loved me. I could see tears starting to form in her eyes, and for the first time since I had met her, I felt some sympathy for her position. I felt like I could never measure up, she continued. Emma and Jake were always talking about the things they did with you, the cookies you baked, the stories you told the garden you worked on together. And Marcus was always saying things like, my mom taught me how to do this, or my mom makes the best version of that. I felt like I was competing with a ghost. You were not competing with anyone, I told her. There was room in that family for both of us. I know that now, but I did not know it then. And when I got pregnant, I panicked. I thought that if I did not establish myself as the primary woman in Marcus's life, I would always be second to his mother. So you tried to push me out? Yes, and I am sorry. I am truly deeply sorry. What I did was cruel and selfish and completely wrong. Sarah started crying, then the kind of exhausted hormonal crying that comes with pregnancy and stress and the realization that you have made terrible mistakes. I do not want to fight with you, she said between sobs. I want our children to have their grandmother in their lives. I want to learn from you instead of competing with you. I want to be part of this family instead of trying to control it. For the first time since I had met her, Sarah seemed like a real person instead of a threat. She was young and scared and probably overwhelmed by the responsibility of being a stepmother to two children while pregnant with her first biological child. "Here is what I need from you," I said gently. "I need you to understand that I am not going anywhere. I am Marcus's mother, Emma, and Jake's grandmother, and soon I will be your baby's grandmother too. I am not trying to take over your family, but I'm not going to be pushed out of it either." "I understand. I also need you to communicate with me directly if you have concerns about anything. Do not put Marcus in the middle of our relationship. If you have a problem with me, come to me. I can do that. And I need you to understand that the house belongs to all of us now. Marcus owns it, I have a life estate in it, and you live there. That makes us partners in maintaining it, not landlord and tenant." Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes with a tissue I handed her. "Can we start over?" she asked. "I know I do not deserve it, but can we try to build a real relationship?" I looked at this young woman who was carrying my grandchild, who had made terrible mistakes but seemed genuinely remorseful, who was asking for a second chance to be part of our family instead of trying to control it. "We can try," I said, "but it will take time to rebuild trust." "I understand, and Lula, I want you to know that you will never be charged rent to visit your family again. Ever. That was wrong, and I am ashamed that I suggested it." 3 weeks later, Sarah gave birth to a beautiful baby girl they named Grace. When Marcus called to tell me I was a grandmother again, I could hear Sarah in the background asking him to tell me that visiting hours at the hospital had no time limits and definitely no fees. It was a small joke, but it told me that maybe, just maybe, we were going to be okay. The first time I held Grace in the living room of the house Harold and I had built together, surrounded by Marcus, Sarah, Emma, and Jake, I felt my husband's presence more strongly than I had since the day he died. This was what he had wanted when he made me promise to give Marcus the house. Not just a roof over his son's head, but a place where our family could continue to grow and thrive together. It took several more months for Sarah and me to develop a real relationship. She had to learn that I was not trying to replace her as the woman of the house, and I had to learn that she was not trying to steal my son and grandchildren away from me. We both had to figure out how to share space and responsibilities without stepping on each other's territory. But gradually we found our rhythm. Sarah started asking for my advice about cooking and gardening. I started respecting her decisions about parenting and household management. Emma and Jake began to see us as a team instead of competitors for their affection. Most importantly, I learned something valuable about the difference between generosity and enabling. I had given Marcus the house out of love, but I had also given it without establishing clear expectations about how that gift should affect our ongoing relationship. By not setting boundaries from the beginning, I had inadvertently created a situation where Sarah felt threatened by my presence, and Marcus felt confused about his loyalties. Now we have family dinners every Sunday again, but they feel different than they did before. Better in some ways, more honest. Sarah contributes her own traditions to our gatherings, and I have learned to appreciate the energy and creativity she brings to our family. Marcus has learned to balance his roles as son and husband without sacrificing either relationship. And Grace, now 2 years old, calls me grandma just like Emma and Jake do. She does not know about the rent demands or the legal documents or the tears that were shed before she was born. All she knows is that Sunday dinners happen in a house full of people who love each other even when they disagree about things. Sometimes love means standing up for yourself even when it is uncomfortable. Sometimes kindness requires strength, and sometimes the most generous thing you can do is refuse to be taken advantage of. I learned that gifts should never come with strings attached, but they also should not come without respect. The house Harold and I built together is still standing strong, sheltering the family we created and the new additions who have joined us along the way. It has seen arguments and reconciliations, mistakes and forgiveness tears and laughter. It has been a symbol of generosity and a source of conflict and, ultimately, a foundation for healing. I learned that when someone shows you who they are, believe them. But I also learned that people can change, grow, and choose to be better than they were before. Sarah showed me that she was capable of selfishness and manipulation, but she also showed me that she was capable of remorse growth and genuine love for our family. Marcus showed me that he could be weak and easily influenced, but he also showed me that he could recognize his mistakes and fight to fix them. And I learned that I am stronger than I thought I was, more valuable than I had been allowing myself to believe, and worthy of respect from the people I love. Some people might say I should have just paid the rent to keep the peace, but peace that comes at the cost of your dignity is not really peace at all. It is just postponed conflict. By standing up for my rights, by refusing to be treated like a second-class member of my own family, I actually made it possible for all of us to find real peace based on mutual respect. If you ever find yourself in a situation where someone you love is taking advantage of your generosity, remember that saying no is sometimes the most loving thing you can do, not just for yourself, but for them too. People who are allowed to treat others badly do not become better people. They just become more entitled and more demanding. I hope my story helps you understand that family relationships require boundaries just like any other relationships do. Love without respect is not sustainable, and generosity without appreciation becomes resentment. The people who truly love you will never ask you to sacrifice your dignity to prove your devotion. Has anyone in your family ever tried to take advantage of your generosity? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments below, because I know many of you have faced similar situations. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life experiences that remind us all that we are stronger than we think we are. Share this with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself is not selfish. It is necessary. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that respect is not something you earn by being generous. It is something you deserve, simply by being human. I wish you all the courage to stand up for yourselves when you need to, and the wisdom to know when that time comes.